So I said I wasn't going to make any more videos to Big Lundy, but I say lots of shit. Anyway, he made a video that I wish he'd made a long time ago because it would have saved me the effort of making all those other videos, because it's his primary thesis that I would like to respond to. That why philosophy is important. Well, this might be a long-ass video, so let's just get right to it.
So I wanted to make a script for this because I think this is a very important thing to discuss, and I really wanted to make my words short and succinct, but I don't think I'm going to be able to manage that.
I made no script, never have, never will.
I was just a part of the Magic Sandwich show. Well, I was there. I called in the beginning, but I wasn't still in the call when this happened. But D.P.R. Jones put forth the notion that where philosophy works, it necessarily turns into science. And there was a lot of argument among theoretical bullshit, Michael Payton saying, I don't think that's necessarily true, I don't think that's necessarily the facts. And then Thunderfoot decided to weigh in. And Thunderfoot, he asked what the use of philosophy is.
Woo, woo, woo. Yeah, Thunderfoot. I think I made a point like this, didn't I? Didn't I say that scientists, they laugh at philosophers? I believe I did. You know, I think Thunderfoot was actually being nice. He's just saying, well, it's basically a joke. Did I say a joke? I just meant that there's no use for it. So, I mean, yay for Thunderfoot and his politeness.
He said, we have methodological naturalism. We've got science. What use is there for philosophy? When science stops working, we'll start looking for alternatives. But why should we use philosophy? What's the point? Well, Thunderfoot, not to get into drama, but I think if you were a little more well-versed on normative ethics, I think if you were a little more well-versed on meta-ethics, I think if you were a little more well-versed in philosophy in general, and how philosophical discourse happens, you wouldn't have gotten into the problems that you have lately.
Well, I suppose that's sort of a good point, but allow me to make one that's about 10,000 times better. The thing is, if Thunderfoot was a little more knowledgeable of science, he wouldn't have gotten into the problems that he's in. Now, Thunderfoot, as I understand it, is your basic physicist, research chemist double threat. And, you know, scientists generally tend to be pretty specialized, but certain types of cross-disciplinary individuals are more likely to emerge. Like research chemistry and physics are both highly quantitative fields of science. And I know you're going to say, but aren't there qualitative aspects to it, like that neutron diffraction shit that he was talking about? Watch my video on generalization, I'm nuts. Anyway, the point is, a Cadillac of men such as this isn't going to be that interested in your qualitative fields of sciences like sociology, psychology, well, just those soft sciences, you could call them. So, but if he had applied some knowledge of psychology and social psychology, or maybe a little evolutionary biology to understand how we as humans have evolved this trait of organizing ourselves into hierarchical structures. In this case, P.Z. Myers was the alpha dog, and here comes little old Thunderfoot, grr, grr, trying to get a piece of meat from the alpha dog, and he's like, P.Z. Myers like, I'm the alpha dog, biatch. But irrespective of the specific sciences that he could have used to understand the situation and have avoided this whole incident, just having a scientific perspective on it would have been helpful. For instance, science can often observe reality and then, without even understanding the underlying mechanisms, make predictions. This is where the whole concept of laws comes from, like the Newtonian laws of gravity. This is just something that he observed and described mathematically without actually understanding the underlying mechanisms of gravity, which, incidentally, are still not fully understood to this day. But still we have these laws that describe the effects very accurately, first with Newtonian gravity theory and then relativity. But if Thunderfoot had applied this, like just observed human behavior, the trends in it, and then used that for its predictive value, he could have seen this coming and avoided it. For instance, people, they don't behave rationally, and that's the problem with Thunderfoot. He's a physicist and a chemist. He assumes incorrectly that people will behave rationally, and this defies everyday observation. So if he had thought about the whole thing scientifically, like, hey, when people bring up these topics, it tends to polarize people into these crazy-ass emotional camps where they will defend their position even against a position that doesn't exist but which they have constructed just to defend against. I mean, it's if you just see how humans do their business, you know this shit's going to happen. You can predict it with scientific accuracy. But, not if you're mainly involved with physics and chemistry and stuff. And really, you can't blame him for the limitation of his perspective. It's an ailment that suffuses the continuum of human existence.
With P.Z. Myers, about misogyny, about social policies concerning harassment, you wouldn't have gotten into huge disputes where you're stuck typing like a teenager saying, for fuck's sake, learn to read, and all that nonsense. Because you can question, you can figure out what is it that this person is coming from? What sort of status is this person coming from? When you don't do that, all you're doing is asserting that your particular evaluation of events is right, and it's just a matter of demonstrating it. And that is a very dangerous path to go down. Theoretical bullshit made the point that, yes, philosophy doesn't make iPads. Philosophy doesn't send us to the moon. And he also made the point that that's not what philosophy is there for. Philosophy isn't there to give us our iPads. Someone else asked in the chat room, me specifically, because I was arguing in favor of it in the chat room. I was going ballistic in there. What has philosophy ever done for us? And I pointed out, it's the basis behind all of your laws. It's the basis behind you being able to question anything. Without philosophy, you can't interpret science. Without philosophy, you can't even begin to ask the questions so that science can begin to investigate them. Yes, science gave us iPads, science gave us Xboxes, science gave us computers, and all of these things. Wonderful for science. I'm very happy for science. I understand that science works. Science, it works, bitches. I understand that. I don't dispute that. But philosophy works too.
No, it doesn't. But we'll get to that.
It just doesn't work the way that you want it to.
Yeah, I mean by actually working? I'll stop interrupting you. Sorry, go on.
When your only method of discourse is scientific discussion, you limit yourself greatly.
Whoa, now, I don't have a dictionary, but isn't discourse just another word for talking? Just blabbity 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 as opposed to actually doing shit? Just saying.
You limit yourself to only talking about that which is empirically demonstrable, and only being able to establish that it is empirically demonstrable. You're not able to draw any conclusions from that.
Jesus come please us, can't draw conclusions from that? That's one of the key aspects of science. You do some experiments, you get some data, you draw some conclusions, you use those conclusions to formulate new hypotheses, and then you test those, and then you get more data, draw more conclusions, use those conclusions to refine the theoretical framework that you've been laying down through this whole series of experiments. Conclusions are a pretty necessary aspect of the whole science thing. Otherwise, you're just sort of sitting around watching. Science isn't a spectator sport.
David Hume's famous is-ought gap. Why are we able to derive oughts from ises? It's not because science is inherently able to do that. No. It's because we have an epistemic value to discover truth, and we have an epistemic value to discover whether or not some things, might suffer, what causes people to feel good.
Oh, please, all of that shit can be easily understood by evolutionary biology. Things which have some sort of survival value for us to want to know, we want to know. Like, why do we want to know what causes suffering? Because suffering is a way of, our biology indicating that we're in a condition that is not conducive to our survival. For instance, pain. Pain indicates damage to the body, which is obviously contra survival. Or loneliness. That can cause suffering because we are social animals and require the assistance of others to survive, right? What other kinds of suffering are there? Hunger, that one's obvious. We need fuel to continue living. Discomfort, like being cold, well, if we're pissing away our bodily resources, maintaining our warmth, then that makes us suffer because it reduces our survival potential. I mean, it can just so easily be understood scientifically, it's just crazy. Anything that there's a value to knowing, it's because The desire to know it and seek out that knowledge increases survival potential. I mean, it's so simple, it's unbelievable.
We have an epistemic value in that, and that value is where we derive those odds, not simply from the fact that some people suffer. There is interpretation involved, and that is philosophy.
Yeah, and there's interpretation involved in science, like what those 2 points that I previously said. Here's the thing, the point I believe Thunderfoot and D.P.R. Jones were trying to make, it's that the entire utility of philosophy is entirely subsumed under the purview of science. Science is philosophy, and then some, and then some, and then some. It does everything philosophy does, but then so much more. See, philosophy is just all about, well, let's ponder the questions. What's this about? What's this about? Let's take our time to properly define everything and all these thoughts and think about how all these thoughts are interrelated. Yeah, philosophy asks the questions, but then science does that and then goes and finds the fucking answers. So, I mean, if science were a porno, philosophy would be the fluffer.
I had Wisdom in Nature 7 write something up for me before the charity event yesterday, and it was I asked him to write something up real quick, sort of an intro to philosophy and why philosophy is important. And he ended up using a different speech because he thought it was a little more pertinent to the subject matter being discussed, and I agree, but I still like what he originally wrote. I'll read it off for you. Very roughly, I would ask you to imagine this house of philosophy as a mansion of 3 interconnected wings. One engaged in critical, rational discourse about concepts like God, not necessarily about God, but concepts in general. How do we find mathematics? How do we define them? How does it work? Not just that it works, but how? Why? One engaged in critical, rational discourse about empirical theories, mainly science. Science presents the empirical theories, and then philosophy has rational and critical discourse about it.
Well, you know, though, science has its own rational discourse about the theories offered. I mean, the very concept of a theory is based in what you would call rational discourse. The only difference between, say, a bunch of scientists discussing theories with this rational discourse and a bunch of philosophers doing it is it's not a complete and total waste of fucking time when the scientists do it, because they can then find flaws in methodology used to find the data that was used to formulate the theories, and then new experiments can be devised to test these theories or possibly refine them, whereas philosophers, they just sit around moralizing like, la-da-da, what does this mean? Da-da-da. You know, they don't actually go and try to, you know, figure it out in any substantive way.
And one in critical and rational discourse about values, which, say, morality, for instance.
Oh my god, not this stupid motherfucking shit. I'm sorry, go on.
What drives us. In the protestations of Hawking, Dawkins, and Harris, we perhaps find the empirical wing in something of a state of revolt, declaring its wish to succeed and exist in a state of independence. The problem, however, is that, unlike certain historical parallels, this ambitious republic is not entirely independent of its peers.
And who are the peers of science? Philosophers? Get fucking real.
Nor does it have any realistic chance of ever being so. Science is a critical, rational discourse about competing empirical theories, and
again you go with the discourse because you philosophy types just love to discourse your asses off while not actually going out and trying to find any data to support it. You forgot the part of science with all the direct observation and experimentation and the actual going out and trying to find some fucking answers to shit and then discussing it. See, that's the difference between philosophy and science. Philosophy just loves to talk and talk and talk about shit, whereas in science, you don't start talking until you have some shit to talk about. Yeah.
And as such, it depends on imports from similar discourse about concepts and values. However, opponents of science, theological and ideological, should take no comfort in the continued proximity of science because, despite their cherished is-ought gaps...
There are no fucking is-ought gaps! Quit saying that stupid shit!
and open question arguments, rational critical discourse about concepts or values is not immune to radical revision in the face of what science can export into it. If philosophy gives a speculation about the universe, and
Totally talking out of its ass? I'm sorry, go on.
science shows that speculation is less than right, then science wins. But how do you interpret that? Philosophy can put forth mind-body dualism, for instance.
I already like where this is going. That crap's been totally debunked.
And then science can demonstrate that everything that we talk about, when we talk about the mechanisms of mind-body dualism, when we talk about what it's supposed to explain, can actually just be explained without invoking the dualistic nature. Then we can state with relative certainty that mind-body dualism probably isn't true. And that's a philosophical thing. And when you say that mind-body dualism possibly isn't true, what are the implications of that?
Oh, who the fuck cares?
Science has no answers for that.
Because it's a ridiculously childish thing to even contemplate. I mean, no, this isn't true. Let's just go ahead and dismiss it then. If it's not true, I mean, why dwell on this shit?
Philosophy does. I don't think that there's a whole lot of things that philosophy can do that science cannot do.
I agree with you there, and I will give you 3 examples of things that philosophy can do that science can't. 1, make for a really good conversation when you're, smoking weed and playing Xbox games with a bunch of strange people. It's something to talk about. Okay, that's 1. 2, you want to get into a girl's pants. Science won't do it, but if you want to seem like you're a really deep thinker, you can use some philosophy because it doesn't have the rigorousness of science and it makes you sound really smart and deep. 3, impress people and seem like an intellectual without actually needing to familiarize yourself with a great number of facts, but you can absorb the ideas of others, and okay, that's 3. Actually, that's the only 3 things. Philosophy is just mental masturbation. Or, put another way, philosophy is a child, and science is the adult that it grew up into.
Certainly not creating computers and all the like, but it certainly has a very valuable use. It is an essential part of the whole of questioning what reality is, what is real, and all these things. And one of the things that Thunderfoot said was, philosophy hides in a realm where words are ill-defined. No. Philosophy is about defining the ill-defined. Philosophy, and that's just one branch of philosophy, ontology. Philosophy is about helping the scientists figure out what it is they're trying to establish as true.
So let me just lay this out here for you. Let's say that you're in some well-funded research lab on the cutting edge of science. Do you suppose the scientists there, let's say it's physicists, they're saying, what questions should we ask today? I better go consult the philosophers. Do you suppose that ever happens? I'm just joking. Of course it doesn't fucking happen.
We are not enemies. We are not competing fields trying to understand the world independent of each other.
No, science is the adult trying to get breakfast ready and, balance a checkbook and planning out their day and all the things they have to do. And philosophy is the toddler tugging on their jeans, asking them about fairies and pixies, or saying, hey, look at this, and stating the obvious and thinking that they've come up with some brilliant fucking insight. Not to be condescending. Wait, no, to be condescending, that's what I was trying for. Did I succeed there?
That's not what's happening. And this dualistic nature, this stigmatization of philosophy, and say you have to either be science-minded or philosophy-minded, it's nonsense.
No, you can be into philosophy, just understand that you have an intrinsically inferior paradigm.
You can be both. You should be both.
Well, yeah, every scientist is already a philosopher. It's just that philosophers are not already scientists. Science, as I said, fully subsumes the utility of philosophy. Every scientist understands all of the tedious crap that philosophers say, but have long since dismissed it to look for answers on the things that can be answered, or realize what is just a bunch of mental masturbation. So yeah, scientists naturally dismiss philosophy as a more childishly simplistic version of their own point of view.
Because without both, you're lacking something. Anyway, I think that's all I really wanted to say. I really hope that this gets to some people, that some people understand the importance of it, that some people understand that science has limitations.
Unlike philosophy, which is basically a bunch of talking and rehashing, there's no limitations there.
It's not the end-all be-all to everything in existence. It doesn't establish our laws. It doesn't establish a valid reason for us to question things. It is just the questioning process and answering.
Well, gee, what's more important? Justifying the asking of the questions, or the asking and answering of the fucking questions? Oh, and FYI, back to, the child's play evolutionary biology thing. We ask questions because of the survival utility. Now, admittedly, most animals don't ask why, because there's an associated cost with having the cognitive capacity to ask why and then seek answers. And so this is just a particular strategy we've adopted, and there is an element of sexual selection involved in it. But once again, it's very easily understood why we would ask questions. See this giant motherfucker? There's a brain in there. Giant evolved brain. It's kind of humanity's thing.
That's all it is. And to hoist it up as anything more is nothing short of wishful, magical thinking. And I'm pretty sure we're all against that. This is Big Lundy, your average atheist, signing out.
Well, I hope I've satisfactorily explained why philosophy is not important, and, as an aside, why scientists are actually kind of annoyed that they even have to discuss it like it's any kind of valid perspective. But, they're too polite to just come out and say, hey, that's a bunch of hogwash that you're using to act like you actually are trying to understand shit, but it's not like you are going out and finding the answers like science does. I mean, it's actually a little annoying. It's like, if you're doing a lot of work to accomplish something, it is annoying when somebody who is not doing any of that fucking work just thinks that they're doing something of equal importance by sitting around and talking about shit. It's annoying. It's really fucking annoying.